As we're entering campaign season, one of the most important things that organizations can provide to their candidates is training. I'm here with Abby Oliver, one of our political team members, to talk about this key resource that these organizations need to be providing to their candidates. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Great. Happy to be here.
Well, you've seen it. You've worked with a lot of organizations, both traditional Republican organizations, YR and groups, conservative groups. This is a thing that candidates or organizations tend to think about a bit too late. You need to provide this now. We're recording this at the end of August, early September, when petitions are starting to get passed. Your candidates need this training right now. This is not something, most of these organizations will start doing these trainings next summer, which is great. But next summer, we need to be out talking to voters. We can't be sitting around a room getting trained on the basics. So this is something we got to do now, right? But in your experience, I've seen the same thing. This is always done too late.
Right. I was actually talking to a potential candidate on the phone today. They're like, so when do we need to start getting ramped up for things? I'm like, well, now. Probably yesterday was probably the time to get ramped up. So you cannot do it soon enough. Training is always good, and it's never early enough.
Well, it's kind of like curling. I always talk about with these campaigns, like whoever's the person at the beginning, I'm sure there's a term for this guy or gal who pushes it, and then everyone else just makes it the thing go where it's supposed to go.
Right.
Like wherever you push it at the beginning, that's where it's going. There's not a lot you can change along the way.
Right.
And so it's that training early is important because these campaigns are going to come out with their branding, their messaging, their strategy, a lot of things that whatever they do today, they're kind of stuck with all the way through next November. You got to make sure you do those early things well. Otherwise, you might be way over here, and then you get trained next summer and you realize, well, that's a really dumb idea, but I just wasted 8 months of my campaign.
Right. And I think candidates that are looking at running right now, once campaign season starts, you're going to be getting voices from a million different directions, people telling you what's the right thing to do, what's not the right thing to do. And like you said, 8 months down the line, you're not even going to know what happened, and you're not going to be prepared for your race. So
so one of the key things as an organization you need to provide to your candidates is this training. It's great if you do it because then you can control the quality. You can you see who's coming in, make sure quality people are coming in and doing this training. You can make sure it happens ahead of time. And you don't have to pick winners and losers. You don't have to pick favorites. It's available to all Republican candidates. Obviously, I would make a note of who does show up that tells me they're more serious. But this is a thing you should be putting in the books now as an organization. First thing I want to ask about is who do you bring in? I'd say the first advice I would give is don't try to do this training yourself. You want people who have political experience. Obviously, I do a lot of training around the country. I'm not saying bring us in, although we're happy to help. I'm just saying bring someone in from outside who has an outside perspective, who has campaign experience, who has political experience. Don't try to do this yourself. You may be good at politics, and that's great. Maybe you have a speaking slot as part of the training, but there are resources out there. There's organizations out there who will come in, like Leadership Institute, and we can hook you up with them if you contact us. Well, they'll come in and they'll bring in experts from around the country to do this training. That's going to bring you a new perspective rather than you trying to do this training yourself.
I absolutely agree. I think in campaigns, it's always knowing what you don't know and finding the resources, outside of yourself. Like if you're not good at fundraising, find someone from out of state who has a lot of experience fundraising. I know that we do that, especially in Illinois. That's a huge challenge. So knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, I think in this situation is really huge. And if you don't have, say the financial resources to bring from someone from like the Leadership Institute in, identify those experts in your community that can be helpful to your candidates.
Well, the great thing about LI and some of those groups is they're funded by their donors. So as long as you can get 15, 20, 25 candidates in a room, maybe you have to partner with some of your surrounding counties or organizations, but if you can get them in a room, LI won't charge you as an organization to come out. So I mean, there's key resources out there. You can get these trainings done for limited to no cost. So there's really no excuse other than you just got to get people in the room to come do the trainings.
Right, and I think with all of our county organizations, it's about putting in the work. Like you're saying, again, there are places that are going to be willing to do it in a way that's going to be cost effective, but as an organization, it's willing to put the time and effort to make sure you're reaching out to those candidates, making sure they know those resources are available. I think you see this all the time. People think, what does the county organization actually do for me? And I think this is a really simple and cheap thing that you can provide for your candidates that's going to make you suddenly relevant again.
Yeah, and it's hugely beneficial to them, so it's worthwhile.
Exactly.
When you're working with these organizations or setting up these trainings, what are some of the topics that you've seen that candidates really need covered that, especially early on, they really need help with? What are things you've seen?
I think it's just the basic infrastructure, how do I set up a campaign budget? How do I fundraise? How do I set up an event? set up events, just those very basic things that, that are second nature to people like us. But, some people have never set up a budget in their entire life, and let alone for a political campaign. So it's like those basic things that keep you on track as a candidate. Or I think we talk a lot about this messaging, like what's the very basic message, that I'm going to be talking about? Because, like, for example, like the abortion issue, like how am I going to navigate that? Like just those simple things that are going to keep the guardrails on, like with bullying, you have those the bumpers on. So,
you still bowl with bumpers?
Oh, no, but I probably should. I probably should. If you've ever seen my bowling game, it could probably use that. But I just think those very basic infrastructural things that a candidate needs, that those are the start from the top and then filter down, and you can worry about all the fancy details later.
I mean, I know that with the trainings that we do, sometimes we'll do 1 day trainings, sometimes 2 days, sometimes 4 days.
Yeah.
If you want to get really in depth, but each time we tend to cover 4 specific topics. First one being sort of strategizing and planning, how to develop a strategy and a plan for your campaign.
Yeah.
Second one being fundraising. If you can't raise the money, then it's all a waste of time.
Exactly.
Third one is messaging and communications, because what you say is so important. If you spend a lot of money on an ad or a mailer, but your message stinks, it's a waste of time and you're going to lose. And then the fourth one is voter contact. How do you get out there and actually talk to voters? You can do each of those topics in as little as 2 hours. You can do them in a whole day, depending on how in-depth you want to get. But really, if you can cover those 4 key areas in your trainings, you're going to set your campaigns on a path to success.
Right. I agree, and I think people tend to overthink it. Like, I need all these things, I need to be versed in all these things. But like you're saying, like getting those very basic things in place, I think are really going to set you up for success.
And you're trying to teach them how to fish. You're not trying to hand them the fish. Like this isn't copy paste this campaign plan. It's teach them what a campaign plan is, because everyone's race is going to be different. So just get them thinking, get them in the right mindset, and then hopefully as they move along, they're going to utilize those skills.
Absolutely.
And that's what I would do early, is lay the foundation. Down the road, we're talking about this a year and a couple months before election day. You'll have refreshers and other things you can do along the way, but this is what I would do now. Lay the foundation now. Question I have for you is, I know you've worked with a lot of organizations. One of the questions I'll get sometimes is, okay, I know these candidates need this training, but I'm struggling getting them to actually do it. How have you seen, like, successfully these organizations get some of these candidates to attend who really need to be in the room during
So I think there's a couple ways you can go about it. Like, make it super easy for them. Like, if they're not willing to actually get in their car and go to a training, maybe that's a sign of a bigger challenge, but put those resources on the website. Okay, like, here's how you put a petition together. Here's how you file your D1 with the State Board of Elections. Make it super simple so it cuts out a lot of the work. Or find someone that they trust, whether it's someone in your organization or one of their friends, and talk to them and say, hey, like, they really should be going here. Or maybe, like, putting those things in their ear that they should be doing. Like, hey, maybe you should really, get your logo together. Hey, you should maybe really do these really important things. So I think if they're not willing to get into the room, find those surrogates or provide those resources that are going to be helpful for them. So
I know a few of the organizations we work with have started using this benchmark program.
Yes.
Where candidates are more likely to get party support if they achieve certain benchmarks. And one of those is attending trainings.
Yes.
So that's sort of like the stick side of this. I mean, basically you can tell these candidates, if you want us to take you seriously, you have to show up.
Absolutely. And I think you need to provide those incentives. Like, I'm always the carrot side of this equation, which which you laugh because you're the other side. But I think you have to provide some incentives, whether it's a negative incentive or a positive incentive. But on that side of the benchmark program, once you do accomplish those things, you do get really positive things like, money from the party, access to those resources and volunteers that you do need to be successful.
Another thing I've seen work is, because everyone has egos and candidates have even bigger egos, is encourage them to bring their teams. Bring your political people, or maybe some interns, or your kitchen cabinet, your family who's not as politically involved. If you get them to bring these other people, then they're in the room. They may be there going, hey, did you listen to the person next to them? But they're at least hearing the words. It's something. That way they don't have to say, oh, I came for training. It's they brought some of their interns, or they brought some of their staff.
Or make them feel like it's their idea. Everyone wants to feel like they're the smartest person in the room. So they're like, oh, you know what? Well, what a great idea if we put together a training. I'm like, wow, that's what a great idea.
Another option is during the lunch period, maybe giving each of the candidates 5 minutes to talk about their campaign. If you come to the whole day training, you get 5 minutes during lunch lunch to say what you're running for, something like that. Like there's options to incentivize them. I like the stick approach, as Oliver said. Just tell them show up or you don't get party support. But the carrot approach also does work. But either way, you need to get these candidates into the room because even if they know it, I'll tell you, I've done personally hundreds and hundreds of these trainings where I've put them on. And every time I'm in there in the room, there's something either I didn't know or that's new. Information is changing all the time. Or I hear someone else say something and I'm like, that's a different perspective that I haven't heard.
Right.
Or it's just a reminder, like, you know what, you're right. We've stopped doing that thing and we should be doing that again. It just reminded me. These campaigns are so complicated that even if you think you know what you're doing, you can gain something from these trainings.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it, especially with politicians, it's ego. People they want to look like they know what's going on and they want to feel important. So maybe it's even taking those candidates aside saying, hey, like, I would love to hear your perspective. Hey, do you have any questions? And then maybe you can guide them in the right direction without putting them in front of that group that's going to make them feel like, oh, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
Okay, as we close this down, any final thoughts on either trainings they should provide or other resources that are related to training that should maybe make available to candidates?
I always encourage the State Board of Elections website. I always encourage them to have that on their website because, again, it provides that very basic information and contrary to what you believe, the government employees, they're actually pretty helpful.
I mean, especially with the state board.
Yes,
that candidate's guide they put out, there's some legalese in there, but that candidate's guide is pretty helpful.
Exactly, and then depending on what county you live in, some counties have more robust websites that can give you ideas of deadlines or just those basic, like I said, the bumpers of your campaign that will at least keep you compliant and keep making sure you can actually stay on the ballot. So
I know something else you mentioned to me before we recorded is organizations having an individual as kind of a point person for training who can also remain as that resource for these candidates beyond those trainings as we move into the next election.
Like I know everyone has these in their organizations, that person that they go to for certain things that is kind of just that, that person they trust. So maybe designate that person like, okay, this is the person you go to if you need someone to look at your petition. Maybe this is the person you go to if you need to help with your fundraiser. Just having those people that you trust that can help these candidates, I think is really great just in general.
Nice. Well, I couldn't be a bigger advocate for training, for making sure that your candidates are off on the right foot, even having a lot of the people within your organization who might not be running today, but they're going to be involved in campaigns, having them attend, because if they know what is coming up in a campaign or why certain things are happening, they're going to be more empowered and effective volunteers for your organization. So these trainings are vital, and you want to do it now. The primary season starts Jan 2, so you've got a couple months here between now and the end of the year. Get these done, get these on the books. That way any of your candidates who have primaries can just sprint from January through March. Those who have general elections can sprint all the way through November. Most, what I see, we do these trainings all the time, and I'm called around the country to do them, and the off year, we do maybe a quarter as many of trainings as we do in the on year of politics, the even numbered year. And yet it should be the other way around, because the even numbered year, that's when we need to be out talking to voters. And so we do it so backwards. Don't be that organization, do the training now. Contact us, we can help, or we can hook you up with another organization who can help, depending on your preference. Whatever we need to do to help you out, we want to make sure you have these resources to get these trainings done in Q4 so we're ready for 2024. Thank you to Abby Oliver for joining me. She helps all our organizations. If you need help, she's the lady to call. I'm Collin Corbett. We'll talk to you soon.